Imagine sitting across from a manager who uh, literally refuses to solve your crisis for the first 3 minutes you're in their office.
Oh, that sounds incredibly frustrating.
Right. I mean, you come in completely panicked, and they just watch you. They ask a few questions, but they don't offer a single solution.
Yeah, you'd probably think, wow, this is a terrible, totally disconnected boss.
Exactly. But actually, they might be the smartest leader in the building. So, welcome to this deep dive. Today, our mission is to unpack a highly practical, one-day intensive framework for completely upgrading how you lead.
And honestly, the most refreshing part of this whole framework is the core premise. Becoming a great manager does not require you to, undergo a complete personality transplant.
Thank goodness.
Right. You don't have to read 14 dense business books or go on some visionary retreat in the woods. It turns out effective leadership is really just a set of very small, highly trainable conversational habits.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because this whole framework rests on making one foundational psychological shift. You have to move from being a fixer to becoming a facilitator of thinking.
Which is a huge leap for most people.
It really is. I mean, think about the classic fixer-manager. They are essentially playing a frantic, never-ending game of whack-a-mole. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
You sit at your desk, an employee pops up with a problem whack-a-mole, you hit it with a quick solution, another issue pops up in your inbox, whack-a-mole. You dictate an answer.
It's just exhausting.
Totally exhausting. You're constantly reacting, and you never actually deal with the machine that's producing the moles in the first place.
Yeah, and that reactive internal monologue is always screaming, I need to fix this fast, just get it off my desk.
Right.
But when you make that shift to being a facilitator, your default thought becomes, I need to understand this well enough to help the right thinking emerge.
So you stop imposing your own quick fixes.
Exactly. You start cultivating the actual conditions where the other person can solve the problem themselves.
It's kind of like being an architect instead of a handyman. Like, if you're an architect and you notice a crack in the drywall, you don't just immediately slap some spackle on it to hide it.
No, because that doesn't solve the real issue.
Right. You stop. You study the foundation. You ask, well, why is this wall shifting in the first place? Before you ever consider moving a beam or laying down new concrete.
That's a great way to put it.
And the overarching system that governs this entire shift, like the blueprint for our architect, is just 3 simple steps. Pause, reflect, ask.
Pause, reflect, ask.
That's the engine driving this entire approach. But, as with anything that sounds simple, actually executing a pause in the heat of a stressful moment feels almost impossible.
It does. And to make that shift from the frantic whack-a-mole fixer to the calm architect, we really have to look at the raw, hardwired biology of human reactions.
The biology.
Yeah. We have to understand why pausing feels so incredibly unnatural for us. The human brain is fundamentally a prediction machine. It evolved to fill in informational gaps as fast as possible, especially under stress. So if you are walking in the woods and hear a rustle in the bushes, your brain does not want you to pause, reflect, and gather data.
No, it definitely doesn't.
It wants you to instantly predict tiger and run.
Right. Which is great if you're trying not to get eaten.
Exactly.
But if you're sitting in your office right now and one of your direct reports comes storming in because a massive client just threatened to walk away, your brain treats that exactly like the tiger.
Yes, exactly.
Before you even have a fraction of the necessary data, your brain starts writing this catastrophic narrative.
What's fascinating here is how the amygdala, which is the threat detection center of your brain, just completely hijacks the system.
It just takes over.
It really does. It floods you with adrenaline and triggers a defensive or reactive posture. But by deliberately delaying your judgment, you actively reduce that amygdala-driven reacting.
So you're forcing a reset.
You are literally buying time for your prefrontal cortex, the logical, analytical, problem-solving part of your brain, to come back online and assess the situation objectively.
Which brings us to the very first practical rule in this framework, the first 3 minutes rule.
This is a tough one.
It's brutal. To rewire that biological default, you have to set a strict boundary for yourself. You are not allowed to solve anything in the first 3 minutes of a hard conversation.
Nothing at all.
Nothing. No solutions, no advice, no fixing. For those first 3 minutes, you are restricted to doing only 4 things.
Just 4.
You can ask open questions, you can reflect back what you just heard, you can name the issue neutrally, and you can summarize. That is your entire toolkit.
And the most effective way to stay within those boundaries is to use very specific phrasing. Instead of jumping in to solve, you say, help me understand what happened.
Okay.
Or you ask, what feels most important here? You might say, So what I'm hearing is, or what do you think is driving this? You have to act as a mirror, not a mechanic.
Okay, wait. I have to push back on this a little bit.
Sure.
3 minutes is a long time.
It feels like an eternity.
It really does.
Yeah.
If an employee comes to me genuinely panicked about a missed deadline, and I just sit there for 3 solid minutes saying, help me understand, or, so what I'm hearing is, you're stressed? Aren't they going to think I'm just stalling?
That's a super common fear.
Or worse, that I'm completely incompetent in dodging the issue because I literally don't know what to do.
I get that. It's a natural fear. But the framework offers a really profound concept to counter that. Reflection is not agreement. It is regulation.
Oh, wow. Regulation.
Yes. When someone is panicked or venting, their amygdala is firing on all cylinders. They are in a state of high physiological arousal.
Right, they're freaking out.
Exactly. When you simply accurately reflect back what they are saying, you aren't dodging the problem. You are actively regulating their nervous system.
So just the act of feeling heard physically calms the body down.
Yes. Heart rate's lower. Breathing normalizes. People actually begin to think more clearly because their own prefrontal cortex starts to engage.
That makes so much sense.
By holding that space for 3 minutes without rushing to fix it, you de-escalate the emotional temperature so that real problem solving can actually happen in minute 4.
Okay, so let's say you've successfully fought your biology. You've bought yourself those 3 minutes of pausing. What do you actually do at that time?
You actively listen and decode the conversation.
Which is a lot harder than it sounds.
Yeah.
Because a frustrated employee doesn't just hand you an organized, bulleted list of facts.
Oh, I wish they did. No, they hand you a tangled mess of facts, emotions, and personal interpretations.
Total chaos.
Pretty much. This is where you have to train your listening muscle. Every difficult conversation operates on 3 distinct layers simultaneously: facts, feelings, and meaning.
I think of this exactly like listening to a complex piece of music.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, when you first hear a symphony, it just hits you as a giant wall of sound. But as you train your ear, you learn to isolate the different elements.
Right.
You listen for the bass line. Those are the facts, the steady, objective reality of what actually happened. Then you listen for the melody. Those are the feelings, the emotional tone riding on top of the situation.
And then there's the lyrics.
Exactly. You listen for the lyrics. That's the meaning. What is the specific story they are telling themselves about this situation? If you can't separate the bass line from the melody and the lyrics, you just get overwhelmed by the noise.
Let's apply that music analogy to a really common workplace scenario. An employee comes to you clearly upset and says, "She ignored my email and now I'm behind."
Okay, if I'm playing whack-a-mole, I just hear the wall of sound, panic, and say, well, let's call her right now and demand an answer.
But if you decode it, you break it down. The bass line, the objective fact, is simply this: an email went unanswered and a deadline was affected.
It's the raw facts.
Right. The melody, the feeling, is frustration or stress. And the lyrics, the meaning they've assigned to this, is a story like, "I am unsupported," or "My colleague is actively sabotaging me."
So my response, staying within those first 3 minutes, needs to target all 3 layers.
Yes, exactly.
I could say, it sounds like the delay has affected your work, and you might be feeling unsupported. Did I get that right?
That's perfect.
You acknowledge the bass line, you validate the melody, and you gently check the lyrics they've written.
Mastering that one single sentence structure dramatically improves your management. And to operationalize this, we have the LARA framework. LARA.
Okay, break that down for us.
Listen, affirm, reflect, ask. First, listen, which means actively do not interrupt. Second, affirm, acknowledge the validity of their concern.
Right.
Third, reflect, say back the essence of what you heard. And finally, invite them to think deeper about the issue.
Let's test LARA on a trickier scenario, because the email one is pretty straightforward.
Okay, hit me.
Say you have a team member who comes in furious, saying, Alex completely took over my presentation today. He sidelined me on purpose.
Okay, first, listen. Let them get that initial burst of adrenaline out.
Let them vent.
Right. Then affirm. Now, you don't agree that Alex is evil, you just affirm the emotional reality. I can hear how incredibly frustrating that meeting was for you.
Right, that's the melody. Then I reflect. I try to pull out the bass line and the lyrics.
Yeah.
It sounds like when Alex jumped in on those slides, it felt like your expertise was being dismissed.
Perfect. And then the critical final step, ask. You hand the ownership back. How do you want to handle your next meeting with Alex?
Oh, wow.
Notice how none of that involves you taking the monkey off their back. You aren't saying, "I'll talk to Alex for you."
But giving them ownership can actually backfire if you don't know what kind of support they truly want in that moment.
That's very true.
Like, how do you figure out if they want you to just be a sounding board, or if they actually want your help dismantling Alex? There is one specific question in this framework that I think is absolute gold for navigating this.
Oh, I know the one you mean.
It's asking the employee directly, what do you need from me right now? Listening, thinking, or action?
This raises an important question, doesn't it? Think about how much friction in the workplace stems from a mismatch in those three things.
A huge amount.
How often do managers cause completely unnecessary stress because they immediately jump to action when the employee just needed listening?
Probably 90% of the time. I know I've done it.
We all have.
Someone comes in just needing to blow off some steam to play the angry melody for a minute, and I'm instantly drafting a restructuring email to HR, and they're looking at me like, whoa, I just needed a vent.
Exactly.
Asking, listening, thinking, or action forces them to clarify their own needs. It facilitates their ability to choose the type of support they receive, and honestly, it saves you from doing a bunch of frantic, unnecessary work.
It is the ultimate tool for a facilitator of thinking. You are guiding them to regulate themselves.
Now, it's relatively easy to play the calm, collected architect when you have the positional power. You can afford to sit back and LARA your direct reports.
Sure, managing down is easier.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The ultimate test of this entire system is what happens when we flip the dynamic.
Managing up.
Yes. We move from managing down to managing up.
Yep.
What happens when the person bursting into your office demanding answers and playing that angry emotion melody at max volume is your boss?
Yeah, that changes things.
Yep.
When you are faced with pressure from above, your biological urge to defend yourself is just overwhelming. Your own amygdala is screaming.
Oh, totally.
But this is where you have to employ the anti-reactivity method. And the cardinal rule of this method is do not meet speed with speed.
I love that. If your boss comes in at 100 miles an hour, you do not accelerate to match them. Because if you both hit the gas, you just crash faster.
Exactly. When a superior is panicked or jumping to conclusions, your job is not to mirror their frantic energy. Your job is to act as a buffer and introduce process, fairness, and clarity.
But how do you actually do that without getting fired?
Fair point.
Like if I'm sitting there and my boss says, this project is a disaster, your team dropped the ball, my first instinct is to immediately list 10 reasons why it wasn't my fault.
Which is exactly what you cannot do. Your first move, before you even open your mouth, is internal regulation.
Okay.
You have to ask yourself an anchoring question. What would a steady leader do in the next 20 seconds? Just adopting that identity forces a pause.
Right, because if I just start defending myself, my amygdala is firing right back at theirs.
Exactly.
So once I'm anchored and breathing, I assume I have to somehow validate that they're upset without actually agreeing that the sky is falling.
That is the critical pivot. You have to separate the data from the story. You verbally say to the boss, let's slow this down. What do we know for sure, and what are we inferring?
That's a bold move.
It creates a boundary. It protects you from getting pulled into their emotional certainty and forces the conversation back to the objective baseline.
That makes total sense physiologically, too. When you ask a panicked boss, what do we know for sure? You are literally forcing their brain to switch from the emotional amygdala back to the logical prefrontal cortex.
You are making them do math instead of feeling anger.
But then what? Do I just stare at them while they think?
No, you reflect without endorsing. You might say, I want to make sure we understand the full picture before acting.
Oh, I see.
You are not agreeing with their catastrophic conclusion. You are validating the need for action, but anchoring it to an inquiry process. You ask questions that demand fairness. What information are we missing, or who have we heard from so far?
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
I'm putting myself in the shoes of someone facing a genuinely angry or unfair higher up. Isn't it incredibly risky to look a boss in the eye and say, let's slow this down?
It can be.
Couldn't that be perceived as insubordinate or like I'm dismissing their urgency?
It carries a massive risk if delivered with the wrong tone. The goal here is to challenge the assumption without escalating the conflict.
So the wording has to be perfect.
The phrasing has to be incredibly precise. You don't say, you're wrong, calm down.
Right. Never tell someone to calm down.
Never. You say something like, before we decide, I think it would help to confirm the sequence of events. Or, a truly excellent phrase from the framework, I'd be cautious about acting on an incomplete picture.
I'd be cautious about acting on an incomplete picture. That is a brilliant piece of verbal judo.
Isn't it?
Because what boss wants to be the person who acts on an incomplete picture? Nobody wants to look rash. You're framing your pushback as a way of protecting them from making a mistake.
Exactly.
You're aligning yourself with their ultimate goal, which is a good outcome, while demanding a fair process to get there.
It is the definition of coaching upward. And there is a core mantra that summarizes exactly why this anti-reactivity method works, both downward and upward.
Go to the
Slow is smooth, smooth is fair, fair builds trust, trust improves performance.
slow is smooth. Smooth is fair. Fair builds trust. Trust improves performance.
That's the core of it all.
When you refuse to meet speed with speed, when you slow down the frantic energy of an unfair boss, you smooth out the process. That smoothness ensures everyone is treated fairly.
Right.
That fairness builds immense trust over time. And trust is the ultimate driver of high performance. It takes the emotion completely out of it and replaces it with an operational truth.
Which brings us to how you actually make this stick. How do you take these concepts and apply them tomorrow morning?
Yes, the practical application.
There is a 7-day challenge that provides a non-negotiable rule to live by for the next week.
Okay, I'm ready.
In every difficult conversation you have for the next 7 days, you are not allowed to defend, correct, or advise until you have first summarized the other person's position to their satisfaction.
To their satisfaction, not just until you think you've got it, but until they literally say, yes, exactly, that's what I mean. That forces you to stay in the pause and reflect stages before you ever get to ask, let alone advise. And during this 7-day challenge, you track just 3 simple metrics.
Just 3.
1, did I interrupt less? 2, did I summarize before responding? And 3, did I ask questions that helped the other person think?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what we are really talking about is culture building.
Yeah, it's so much more than just a management hack.
This isn't just a trick to make you a slightly less stressed manager. When you practice this, when you coach downward by helping your team find their own answers, and you coach upward by demanding fairness and clarity from your bosses, you are systematically dismantling the whack-a-mole chaos.
You're changing the whole system.
You are creating a fundamentally more sane, rational, and fair workplace for everyone around you.
And it doesn't take a total reinvention of your personality to get there. Just 3 words. Pause, reflect, ask.
That's really all it takes.
So what does this all mean? As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought that builds on everything we've just covered. We've talked extensively about using LARA to decode conversations with other people, separating the objective baseline facts from the subjective melody and lyrics they've created. But what happens when we turn this framework inward?
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. Next time you're sitting alone at your desk, feeling incredibly frustrated right before a high-stakes meeting, can you LARA yourself?
That's a great challenge.
Before you even step into the office or jump on that video call, can you listen to your own internal monologue and separate the objective data from the victim story you might be telling yourself? Can you be the calm architect of your own mind, rather than just reacting to the moles popping up in your own head? Something to think about.